The 2022-23 LA Clippers schedule is out. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking my initial reactions to the schedule, what marquee matchups stick out, specifics like back-to-backs, how many afternoon matinee games that have killed the Clippers in recent years do they have, and how much the regular season even means for the Clippers this season on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Clippers. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day. My name is Darian Vaziri, your host, as well as a host of my very own podcast, Dime Dropper Pod. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a YouTube channel where I go live after Clipper games and post vlogs of Clipper games when I attend them. So make sure you check that out, as well as making NBA history content on the regular. But for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Clippers schedule. The 2022-23 schedule was released today, and a couple of things stuck out. So I'm going to go over my initial reactions first. Here are some notes that I took that might be interesting. So the NBA has done a job of eliminating the 5 games in 7 nights thing. So the Clippers have no 5s and 7s this season, which is great. And the Clippers will also be done with Eastern Conference road games after February 6th. So for the last all of March, all of April, there will be no road games against Eastern Conference teams, which is great for travel and good to be closer to home towards the end of the season. 15 back-to-backs the Clippers have this year. That's one more than last year, so expect Kawhi Leonard, if he is healthy, to be sitting out a lot of those, if not all, and Paul George as well. And then 32 nationally televised games, which is, I think, 5th or 6th highest in the league, which is great. 13 of those on NBA TV. But the Clippers clearly are going to be in the limelight this season. The NBA knows a lot of teams or fans want to watch them play, so they're getting a huge nationally televised slate of games. And then a big topic of conversation amongst Clipper Nation in recent years has been the matinee games or the afternoon games that the Clippers are forced to take part in because they are secondary priority at the Staples Center, or even tertiary priority if you count the LA Kings after the Lakers, of course. So growing up, or any Clipper fan typically knows that the Clippers play on Sundays at 12:30 while the Lakers get the 6:30 game where they can, it's more convenient for people to show up than afternoon. And in some recent years, the Clippers as a team have really struggled with those games. Of course, the game against the Dallas Mavericks early in the 2020-21 season where they got 50-pieced sticks out right off the top of my head. But last year, and I wanted to make sure I took this number down, in the afternoon home games, so only the home games, not the ones on the road, the Clippers were 5-2 last year. And I attended a good amount of those games. As I said, if you want to look at the games I went to, you can check out my YouTube channel. I film a vlog for every single game if you're into that stuff. But Reggie Jackson made a game winner in one of those games. There were just some easier games. I remember the Pistons came to town on Black Friday and the Clippers beat them up. So 5-2 last year in those afternoon games. And if we're being real, even though that number has been basically doubled this season, 13 afternoon home games, it says, that's definitely going to be annoying. But if the Clippers are really a championship contender, like I suggested in the last episode, then the timing of the games should not mean that much, if we're being real. Those are kind of excuses. As a team that's expected to win the championship or have those kind of expectations, you got to be ready to play every game, no matter what time it is, and give your best. And I expect nothing less from this Clipper team. Of course, there are going to be some slip-ups along the road, but they should be ready and know that those afternoon games can be problematic and approach them a little differently. And I think last year they did exactly that. But let's talk about some other fun facts about the schedule. So those are some of the main takeaways I got. But something that really stuck out, all right, actually, before I get into what really stuck out, which was the first 10 games, the Clippers will have a 5-game road trip in December and a 6-game road trip in January, and then 3 separate 5-game homestands, one in December, one in January, and another in March. From what I've been told and what I'm hearing, the initial rumblings, March is one of the easier months for the Clippers. But right after that new year, and I'm going to get to that in a bit, is where it gets really tough. And you got a lot of good teams that the Clippers will be playing one after the other. But the initial thing that really stuck out about the schedule was the first 10 games. So I mentioned in the first episode that I just did, starting the season for the Clippers is going to be extremely important. I think for any team that wants to win a championship, starting the season is important. If you look at the team that just won the championship this past season, the Golden State Warriors, they started the season, I believe, 18-1. And they hit the ground running playing against the Lakers at Staples Center the first game, and then the Clippers at Chase Center the second game. And they just had an easier schedule and built off that momentum and had that initial belief that, look, we're starting the season top 2 seed. We have that confidence, and winning builds rhythm and confidence throughout the team. And that's mainly why I think this regular season is so important for the Clippers, to build rhythm, to build consistency. I would say build camaraderie, but the camaraderie is already there. It's really about consistency and rhythm, playing with one another without many injury issues or people being out of the lineup constantly, and being able to hit a flow, get a winning streak going, a couple winning streaks. What really sucks sometimes is you'll build a winning streak, you'll get 3 or 4 in a row, and then somebody's sitting out the game or being load managed, and then the streak just breaks, which is a very unfortunate thing in today's NBA. Also, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this season we'll see the end of contact tracing and guys missing games with COVID as much. I think it's still bound to happen a couple times, but hopefully not nearly as much, because that we can do without after these last 2 years. But overall, these first 10 games really stick out to me because I believe the Clippers should actually win at least 9 of them. And that is not just an exaggeration. That is not me coming as a homer. That is me thinking that the Clippers have the best team in the league on paper. And if you're the best team in the league and you're playing at home, you should expect to win any of those games. And so I'm assuming that the team is going to be healthy. I'm assuming that Kawhi Leonard is going to be ready to go for opening night, like I said in the previous episode. So let's take a look at the first 10 games. Opening night, the Clippers play the Lakers. We've seen this so many times since the Clippers became good in any capacity. And we also know how the Clippers have fared against the Lakers in recent years. 32-7 since 2012-13. That's 32 wins for the Clippers. And the more important number really is in the Ty Lue era, they have won all 7 games against the Lakers, including the opening game of the season in 2020-2021, which was Ty Lue's first game as Clipper coach. And Paul George was fantastic in that game. So it's going to be a similar game to that. First game of the season on the Lakers floor on TNT, Thursday, October 20th. Mark your calendars, Clipper Nation. And I think it should be a win because there's no reason to believe otherwise the way the Clippers have played against the Lakers lately. They're a better team than the Lakers heading into the season. So I expect a win there. Next game at the Sacramento Kings also should be a win. And then the tricky one, the one where I said maybe we'll lose, so I gave the Clippers one loss here in these first 10 games. The Phoenix Suns. It is at Staples Center on a Sunday, but it's a back-to-back coming off that Sacramento game. So just assuming that the Clippers aren't a back-to-back and the Suns are not, I'd say the Suns have a good chance of winning that game, especially considering if my prediction of Kawhi Leonard being healthy for the first game of the season is true, that means that he will likely sit out that Sunday game. So I'll give the Suns that game. After that, the Clippers have 2 games on the road back-to-back against the Thunder, the same opposition. So both matchups in Oklahoma City are finished right then and there by October 27th. It's not a back-to-back. They play the first one on the 25th of October and the second on the 27th. Now, it can be tricky sometimes playing the same NBA team back-to-back because, they just make adjustments and you're against these professionals. They're all so good. Sometimes it just happens that you beat them once and you lose to them once. But the Clipper fan in me that thinks and knows the Clippers are a far better team than the Thunder expects them to win both of those games. And then they return home to play the New Orleans Pelicans on Sunday, October 30th, a game in which they should have circled on their calendars, considering the Pelicans are the team that knocked the Clippers out of the play-in game, and it's the first of many of those Sunday afternoon games. I believe that should be a win. And then 2 games against the Rockets, 1 game home and 1 game away. I believe both should be wins. And then against the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio, again should be a win. and then at home against the Utah Jazz on Sunday, November 6th. Considering they just lost Rudy Gobert and could be losing Donovan Mitchell, that should also be a win. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. So to me, 9-1. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Can the Clippers go 9-1 in those first 10 games? What's your prediction for those first 10 games? Let us know in the comments. And before, or should I say coming up next, I'm going to talk about some of the key matchups in the season and what stretch of games could potentially be problematic to watch out for if you're a Clipper fan. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Alrighty. Let's start talking about some of the key matchups for this upcoming season. So, certain teams, I was just looking at the schedule, stick out. As much as the NBA wants to promote the whole Lakers, Clippers, Battle of LA thing, I think Laker fans are tired of it because to them, the Clippers are the little brothers that still, despite winning all these regular season games, haven't won anything of significance, which to them is a championship. And then Clipper fans are just like, we beat the Lakers all the time these days, so it's not even a big deal. And I tend to agree because this whole, I can get into it on a different podcast, and I plan on doing it about the whole, are the Clippers and Lakers rivals? But when you haven't met in the playoffs yet, it's just not real to me. The Lakers have never inflicted pain on me as a Clipper fan in terms of the actual team's performance. Nothing more than regular season defeats. So I have no real animosity towards them like many Clipper fans do. It's more about the in-season spats between fans and trash talk and bragging rights for a weekend or two. But at the end of the day, the conversations all end up devolving into the same stuff. Clipper fan brags about the current state of the teams. Laker fan goes to 17-0 rings. And then the conversation just keeps going. So that's just kind of how Laker Clippers stuff goes. So I'm not really looking at the Lakers. I don't consider them a threat this season. If you're a Laker fan and you disagree with me, I apologize. But not really. That's considering a team that did not even make the play-in last year. And right now their roster, just being objective, does not look that great. I think that the Darvin Ham hire is going to be good. But I just don't see the Russell Westbrook, LeBron James fit being that much better than it was last season. And until they get that portion of their team sorted out, it's very hard to build and add good role players around those three guys with how large their salaries are. So I'm not really considering the Lakers. But teams that I'm looking at, Dallas Mavericks, the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, and then, of course, potential finals opponents, if the Clippers are lucky enough to get there, the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks mainly. As for the Phoenix Suns, so a couple things that stuck out. 3 of the 4 matchups with the Suns include the Clippers on second night of back-to-backs. So 3 times that the Clippers play Phoenix, they will be having just played the night before. Now, I don't know how many of those games the Suns will have played a game the night before, but that doesn't favor them very much. And then the 4 teams that the Clippers in the Western Conference will play only 3 times and not 4 are the Portland Trailblazers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the New Orleans Pelicans. So as far as looking at that, if you're a Clipper fan, it kind of sucks that you're not playing Portland 4 times because considering the matchup recently with the Blazers, the Clippers do really well against them, and the Blazers are expected to be maybe a team that gets into one of those last play-in spots, but I don't expect too much out of them. So I'm a little disappointed as a Clipper fan that they're not playing the Blazers 4 times, but the Clippers can definitely do without playing Memphis 4 times, considering how they matched up against them last season, losing all 4 games. And then Minnesota, the team that beat them in the play-in game, obviously lost Patrick Beverley, but they're adding Rudy Gobert. And so playing them one less time, pretty neutral or indifferent on that. And then New Orleans, who's a team that's given the Clippers problems in the past, playing them only 3 times, so feeling fine on that. As far as some of the main key matchups this season, the Golden State Warriors are obviously a team that Clipper fans and the Clippers should have their eyes on. You know that it could be inevitable that the Clippers match up against the Warriors in the playoffs. To go get that title and grab it from someone, sometimes and oftentimes you have to go through that team. And regular season games, despite the fact that the regular season is not prioritized the same way it once was, you don't have teams looking at them as tests for the upcoming playoffs and testing out how they do against certain teams, because you have a lot of guys load managing or injured. And, if Kawhi Leonard's not playing and the Clippers play the Warriors, that's not really a gauge of what it's going to look like if they play in a playoff series, because that's such a big key factor that just is totally going to be on the Warriors coaching staff, scouting reports, and it's like playing the Warriors without Stephen Curry. You cannot take that seriously. So assuming that everyone's healthy, the first time the Clippers will be playing the Warriors will be at Chase Center on November 23rd on ESPN. So that game really stuck out to me because I really want to see, with Kawhi Leonard back, how the Clippers fare against these defending champions. Because the Warriors are a team, obviously everybody knows about their explosive offense, the way they move the ball, Steph Curry and all that. But I really want to see how the Clippers' wings on defense match up against that offense, and how the Clippers do with all their commotion and their off-ball screens and all that kind of stuff, because it's much different than playing against a team that just runs a lot of high pick and rolls where you can just switch and blow those up. The Warriors play a motion offense. They move without the ball better than any team in the NBA. So it'll be really interesting to see the Clippers defend against that, but also to see how the Warriors defend against the Clippers. Andrew Wiggins did an incredible job guarding the best player on other teams in the playoffs. He did a great job on Kawhi Leonard in one of the matchups that the Clippers played against them in the 2021 season. But that's the thing. It's just one guy. Is Klay Thompson going to be able to stick Paul George and do a good job of it? Because Klay Thompson, he did look pretty decent on defense in the playoffs, but not what he once was. And the Clippers having 2 great wing players that can get a bucket on almost anyone is just something that's going to be tough. I'd say when you look at the matchup between the Warriors and the Clippers, the Warriors may have the best, the third, fourth, and fifth maybe best players in the matchup, but the Clippers have 2 of the top 3, and that's not even up for debate with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard around Stephen Curry. So that's the advantage that the Clippers have. Another key matchup that stuck out for me, a home game against the Boston Celtics on December 12th, and then just a little over 2 weeks later, playing them at Boston on December 29th on NBA TV. Both of those games should be interesting for multiple reasons. When Kawhi Leonard last played against the Celtics, or at least in 2020, those 2 matchups were 2 of the best games of any game in the NBA in that regular season before COVID hit. Incredible games both in Boston and in LA. I think both went to overtime. I believe Paul George and Kawhi Leonard's first game as Clippers together was against the Celtics. So considering the Celtics have a lot of long wings and have built their team around a similar mold where their 2 best players are 6'7", 6'8" wing players, score first like Paul and Kawhi, those are going to be awesome matchups. And then at Milwaukee on February 2nd, 2023 on TNT should be a great matchup. And then when I mentioned tough stretches, the new year is going to be tough for the Clippers. They play a lot of really good teams, starting with the Miami Heat on the first game of the new year. That's January 2nd. And then after that, Denver Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Atlanta Hawks, Dallas Mavericks, Denver Nuggets. They get a couple easy games after that. But the toughest stretch of the season for me that I saw, at least in a 5-game stretch, was in February. You had from February 8th to the 16th, the Dallas Mavericks, Milwaukee Bucks, Golden State Warriors, and then at Phoenix in the very next game. So that's from February 8th to February 16th. It's going to be a tough schedule, but at the same time, guys, I'm not a huge fan of looking so deep into the schedule because you just got to take it one game at a time. That's what all the athletes say, and as a fan, that's how I like looking at things as well. But you know what else I like looking at? How important the regular season really is. Is it going to be a big deal for the Clippers, or is it just about getting guys healthy, It doesn't matter what seed they get, just being healthy for the playoffs. We're going to talk about all that coming right up. The LA Clippers are currently plus 750 to win the 2023 NBA title. Those are the fourth highest odds of any team to win the title this year. And to place your bet, go to betonline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Go place your bets on the Clippers to win that 2023 title right now. Find reviews and news of every league, including the MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Make sure to place those bets for the Clippers to win that 2023 title. All right, to close out the show, I wanted to talk about how much the regular season really means for the Clippers. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had throughout the league. The regular season these days has really changed, really in the course of my lifetime being a fan of basketball. Even 10 years ago or even 7 years ago, it felt so much bigger. I think now everybody is so concerned about injuries that they just want to make sure that their teams and their stars are healthy going into the playoffs. And sometimes that can come at the expense of, as I said earlier in the episode, winning streaks and building rhythm throughout the season. For example, the Brooklyn Nets in 2020-2021, they totally neglected the process. They only had James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant play like 9 games. I know Kevin Durant was injured for a large portion of that season, but it felt like they were being just extra cautious with everybody, and it kind of came back to bite, and they did end up getting injured again. So that's one thing, too, is that a lot of these teams will sit out their guys and be very cautious about injuries, but they'll come back and still get injured. I mean, think about it with the Clippers. In 2020-21, Kawhi Leonard did tone down the load management, but he was still load managed some nights and sat out back-to-backs, and they were just very cautious with injuries, and then he tore his ACL still. So that's the thing, is you really risk injury every single time you step on that basketball court. Obviously, you can try to mitigate it with lessening the load and all that, but the regular season is important. Now, for some teams like the Warriors, they just want to get a top 3 seed probably and be okay with it. They don't need to get the number 1 seed. And I don't think you necessarily need to get the number 1 seed, as you saw with the Phoenix Suns this past season. They worked so hard in the regular season. And if you're asking a Suns fan right now, they're saying that the regular season means nothing. They're going to say that I don't care what we do in the regular season. Let's just fast forward to the playoffs, because that's how you feel when you have such a great regular season and it just crumbles within much earlier than you expect in the postseason. And I felt that way as a Clipper fan in the 2013 season when the Clippers set a franchise record for wins at the time with 56, lost to the Memphis Grizzlies in round 1, had me devastated. And then the next season, the whole 2014 season, I was like, it doesn't matter if we just lose in the first round. So I really did not care about the regular season as much that season. But one thing I've learned as a Clipper fan is that the regular season is very important. Not necessarily because of the results, but because of the process. That thing I talked about earlier, rhythm, building winning streaks, building good habits, playing winning basketball and getting used to playing winning basketball a certain way. You know, when you watch a game and there's a team, for example, you haven't seen in a while, and you watch them play after they've done better than you expect, you see immediately within the first half of the game usually why they have improved so much. You'll see players that are in rhythm, just shooting the ball with different confidence. Guys you didn't expect to make shots are making shots, or should I say, guys you don't expect to hit certain shots, hitting those shots, and you going, what the hell? No wonder they're winning so much. And that's kind of all stems from getting rhythm and confidence as a team and what it does to you as an athlete. And the Clippers have, with, I want to say the last 8-9 years, I'd say maybe after 2015, have really neglected a lot of the process in the regular season of trying to get a good record. It seemed like when Glenn Rivers was coach and for those of you that know and know me, I'm only going to refer to him as Glenn Rivers on this podcast. Sorry if you like the guy a lot. He did a lot. He did some good things with the Clippers, and I'm going to leave it at that. But with Glenn Rivers, it felt like towards the end of his tenure, it was all about getting guys to the playoffs healthy at the expense of regular season chemistry and rhythm. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin towards the end, because they couldn't really stay healthy. And then in 2020, I mean, Kawhi and Paul George, you heard it multiple times from Glenn, that they barely practiced with one another. And that you could clearly tell on the court. They lacked chemistry, they lacked cohesion, and it just looked like a bunch of individuals with a lot of talent going out there. And despite that, the Clippers still got the 2 seed, but I really just don't feel like the Clippers have prioritized the regular season with the same intensity as the first couple years of Lob City. I'd say in the 2020-21 season, they did, but they were just, Paul George was out here and there, and Kawhi was out here and there, and as I said, a little bit of load management, so maybe not even that. I want to see the Clippers try to get the 60 wins that I targeted and said they should target in the last episode, and by doing that, it's all about health, but as I said, barring any major injuries, I'm talking a guy missing a month plus, and I'm talking really, when I say a guy, I'm talking Kawhi or Paul George missing a month plus. The Clippers, if Kawhi misses one night of a back-to-back or Paul misses one night of a back-to-back, should have the roster to beat most teams on a given night. And that's why when you look at the team that won 42 games last year with Paul George missing 51 games and Kawhi missing 82, you assume Kawhi and Paul play 55 plus, you can increase that number by 15, 16 games at least. So I'm hoping that the Clippers get off to that hot start that I talked about with those first 10 games, 9-1 or 8-2, and that will set the precedent for a great season overall. In my opinion, this regular season is pivotal for the Clippers. I do not think they can take this lightly. I don't think that if the Clippers get a 4-seed or lower, they will win the championship. If you look at the history of the NBA, and this is where me being the NBA history nerd comes in, only 2 teams have won the NBA championship when they finished below the 3 seed. That's the Houston Rockets in 95 and Bill Russell's Celtics in 69. And they were the 4 seed, the final seed to make the playoffs. Every other team has been a top 3 seed. So in my opinion, the Clippers need to get a top 3 seed or they will not win the championship. But I want to take it a step further. I said 60 wins. If you finish with 60 wins and you get the 3rd seed, oh man, that means you play in a ridiculous conference. But I think the Clippers need to get a top 2 seed. Why? Because they've never gotten a top 2 seed in a season that was not interrupted by COVID. So yes, the only season they got the 2 seed was the 2020 season, and they didn't even get to reap the benefits. But it would be so nice as a Clipper fan for once to look forward to a second round series that starts at the Staples Center in Los Angeles here. They've never experienced that. We've never experienced that as a fan base. The Clippers need to get a top 2 seed. Let's shoot for the number 1 seed. 60 wins. This is all possible, but it's really not possible unless Kawhi Leonard starts the season, in my opinion. That's really what it comes down to. If Kawhi Leonard's ready to go from game 1, then my target record is that 9-1 I indicated earlier. But if Kawhi Leonard doesn't start the season, well, some of those games that I considered automatic wins become potentially questionable. I could see us easily losing one of those games to OKC or definitely losing to those Suns. Maybe you even lose to the Lakers. All right, maybe I'm pushing it. But LeBron James and Anthony Davis are also going to be fired up in game 1 as well. So, opening night is always unpredictable. You can't take too much from it. And my overall takeaway is that take it one game at a time, Clipper Nation. One mistake I made as a fan in the past was I would look at a stretch of games like the next 10 games because I'd get nervous about the record and say, okay, if we win eight of these 10 games, we'll be 25-16 and we'll be good to go for a little bit. And I'd always do that, and then Blake would get hurt, or Chris Paul would get hurt, and I'd just be in the mud. So my advice to you as a fan is take it one game at a time. If Kawhi and Paul George are playing, enjoy it, savor it, milk it, and hope it lasts, and just enjoy the game and move on to the next after. My personal thing is, and I'm going to have to change my ways being the host of this podcast, but I never look past the next game in anything I do, whether it's me playing the game, coaching a game, in any sport, NFL, soccer, whatever. I only look at the next game. People ask me, who are you playing next? I say, I don't know. I mean, who are the Clippers playing the game after next? I say, I don't know, man. I'm just focused on the next game, Denver or whoever it is. So that's it for me today, guys. Remember to comment on the YouTube channel. What do you think the Clippers record will be in those first 10 games? 9-1, do you agree with my statement? Comment if you disagree. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's show everybody, Clipper Nation, we have fans. That's a running joke. Clippers have no fans. Let's get this channel up to 1,000 subscribers. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at DimeDropperPod. And if you want an even more uncensored, raw opinions on how I feel about the game of basketball and the Clippers, the Lakers, whatever, you can follow me on and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really put in a lot of work on that. Big into the history of the game if you want to learn more about past eras as well. Dime Dropper Podcast on YouTube. Make sure you give me feedback on the episode, guys. We always want to know what I can do better, or make sure you give me feedback on the episode to let me know what I can do better as a host. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and go Clippers. Remember to check on Locked On NBA as well, 5 days a week with some of the best hosts in the business. Thank you, and go Clippers.